risk of showers in the southwest during Friday. Elsewhere again, it's a similar story. It starts pretty grey. Most places become sunny. Parts of that east coast may well stay misty and murky. Cooler here again as well, with the top temperatures further west. But the sunshine turning hazy with the cloud increasing in the southwest. An increasing chance of showers across parts of the country as you head through Friday and into Saturday. It's also going to turn more humid.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to...
There he goes. Prince Harry has finished day 2 in court. Done. What did you make of it? Are you out there? The people that have sympathy for him. Not many of you was watching my show last night. Are you out there? Has he changed your mind today? And brace yourself, pace yourself, get yourself ready, everybody. Are you ready? The first heat health warning of the year has been issued. Are you all right? Temperatures set to soar to a whopping 29 degrees. Hang on a second. Can I just press pause? Isn't this just called summer? Can we pack it in with the outrage? Am I missing something? I'm sure you'll tell me if I am. And get this, 11-year-olds as young as that told to dress up in full-blown drag, I quote, to school to celebrate Pride. Why on earth are kids involved in celebrating the sexuality of adults? Do we even need this Pride stuff anymore? A whole month of it. Also, apparently, calling teachers Sir and Miss should no longer be a thing either. Please give me a break. And if you live in social housing, should you be evicted if your kids are involved in knife crime and refuse to grass up and help secure convictions? That's a recent proposal. Do you agree with it? Why draw the line just at knife crime? Should we spread it even further? And I cannot finish my programme without talking about cruise ships. Wow, look at that. Would you fancy a nice long weekend on one of those? Well, these will be heading to Migrants for use by those. What do you make to that? A bit ludicrous, if you ask me. I'll be getting into that with a face I've not seen on here for a while, David Starkey. He'll be rejoining me tonight. But before we get into it all, let's bring ourselves up to speed with the news.
Michelle, thank you. The top story from the GB newsroom at 6 o'clock. The Duke of Sussex has left the High Court in London a short time ago after his second day on the witness stand, giving evidence in his privacy case against Mirror Group newspapers. Prince Harry said he believed journalists had used unlawful techniques to get stories about him, including placing a tracking device on the car of his ex-girlfriend Chelsea Davy. He also claimed they went to extreme lengths to cover up their alleged phone hacking. The publisher denies any wrongdoing. Well, away from the High Court and to the United States now, where the Prime Minister has visited the Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. It's ahead of his fourth meeting with the US President at the White House tomorrow. During talks with Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak's expected to reaffirm Western support for Ukraine, as well as addressing the growing threat from China, climate change and the regulation of AI. Football, and 16 people have been detained by Czech police after fans clashed ahead of the Europa Conference League final in Prague. 3 people are said to have been injured when Fiorentina fans attacked West Ham supporters in a bar. A police officer was also attacked. Videos shared on social media shows fans throwing cafe chairs in the street. Here, the Metropolitan Police says the force will apologise if it's found that people were wrongly arrested during the King's coronation. 6 members of the anti-monarchy group Republic were held for 16 hours before being released without charge. Some volunteers from a Westminster Council safety scheme were also caught up in the 62 people who were detained. Thousands of holidaymakers could be affected by a fresh wave of strikes at Heathrow Airport this summer. More than 2,000 security guards from the Unite Union have announced the dates of their latest walkout, which will be held across 31 days between the 24th of June and the 27th of August. That'll cover the start of the school holidays as well as the August bank holiday weekend. Unite says the airport's priorities are all wrong and strikes will continue until a fair pay offer is reached. News from Rome, and Pope Francis is recovering from a 3-hour-long operation on an abdominal hernia. The Vatican's saying there were no complications throughout the surgery and that the Pope will stay in hospital for several days to recuperate. The 86-year-old pontiff suffered a number of medical setbacks recently, spending 5 days in hospital in March with a lung infection, and 2 years ago he had surgery on his intestine. Structural engineers are warning that a badly damaged dam in the south of Ukraine, which has left thousands of people without their homes and businesses flooded, could deteriorate further in the coming days. Russia is continuing to deny responsibility for the huge explosion that ripped through the Kakova Dam in the early hours of yesterday morning. Our security editor, Mark White, has this special report.
In towns and villages along the Dnipro Valley, downstream from the Kakhovka Dam, this is a rapidly evolving catastrophe. More than 80 towns and villages in the direct path of the floodwaters are already being inundated. It is a race to reach the most vulnerable, trapped by the rising waters. Boats and high-sided vehicles have been commandeered to try to reach those affected. Overnight, many people have moved to the top floors of their houses and even onto the roofs to escape the rising water. But even those elevated positions are far from safe, with whole structures being lifted up and washed downstream. And as bad as the situation is now, structural engineers are warning it's likely to get far worse in the days ahead. The dam, already breached and weakened, will continue to deteriorate, with more of the dam wall likely to give way, sending even more floodwater cascading down the Dnipro River valley. Perhaps, predictably, both sides are blaming each other for this man-made disaster. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he was in no doubt this massive explosion caught on a CCTV camera was the result of a Russian detonated mine within the dam. Russia, for its part, is blaming Ukrainian artillery and missile fire for the breach. Both the UK and US governments are leaning towards Russian involvement in the explosion, but say they are still gathering and assessing all of the available intelligence. In the meantime, the priority is, of course, on the rescue efforts for an unfolding disaster that's being felt more widely than just by the area's human population. In the Ukrainian-held city of Kherson, almost all of the animals within the local zoo have drowned. And elsewhere, along with the rescue of people, volunteers have been bringing pets and farm animals to safety. All of these rescue efforts are being hampered by the fact this is still an active war zone, with sadly no pause in the fighting. Russia accusing Ukraine of launching drone strikes on the flooded Russian-held town of Kakhovka, and Ukraine accusing Russia of shelling flooded areas around the city of Kherson. Mark White, GB News.
You're up to date on TV, online and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News. Now back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7. Alongside me, historian and GB News contributor David Starkey and political commentator Joe Phillips. Welcome, both of you. Haven't seen you for a while. It's good to see you again. One of my viewers has just said, where's Peter Hitchens? Don't see him anymore on Dewbs & Co. Have you dumped him? I've not actually known. He'll be coming up in the coming days. So, yeah, you can stay tuned for that one. Get in touch with me tonight, all the usual ways. Got lots coming up. Everything from Prince Harry to Migrant cruise ships. That kind of sentence, I can't help but snigger a little bit when I say, because honestly, I say this often and I do feel it pretty much every day. The world is going mad, if you ask me. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address, or you can tweet me as usual at gbnews. But of course, you will be aware, unless, I don't know, you've been under a rock sleeping somewhere or whatever today, or quite frankly out there enjoying the sun. But Prince Harry, he was in court again today. Apparently, he almost had a breakdown and he was pressured by this and pressured by that. And I was asking last night whether or not people out there had any sympathy for him. I was trying to explain my experience of having my privacy invaded. It didn't convert any of you at all, but having seen a second day of it, are you sitting there today thinking, actually, you do feel sorry for him? Lots of the how do I say this nicely? Criticism. It's basically saying there's too much contradiction between what he says in his memoir Spire and what he basically says now when he's standing in the courtroom. It's all become, I'll start with you actually, Joe, it's all become a bit of a kind of soap opera now. Do you have any sympathy for Harry when you're watching all of this unfold?
Well, he's created a soap opera, Michelle. He wants to star in the soap opera. I do have sympathy. I have sympathy for anybody who has had their personal and private information stolen illegally, as is the case for many, many people. I mean, you only have to think of the parents of Millie Dowler, her phone was hacked after she had been murdered. You know, there are terrible things, and I think the terrible thing, the worst thing of all, is that because you can't imagine where these stories have come from, you lose trust and faith in those that you hold closest.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain to people
your
yesterday.
family, you know, your closest friends, because where else could it, you know, so it's a very serious issue and it's completely wrong. Unfortunately, I think Harry has been parading his woes in public, poor me, for such a long time. There is very little public sympathy. You know, whether his recollections are true or not remains for the court to decide. But, you know, he doesn't seem to be able to move on. This was happening a long, long time ago.
But why should you have to move on? That's the question that I would ask. If someone has indeed been unlawful in their acts, if they have been going into voicemails or using private investigators in a way that they shouldn't, why should anyone have to move on? Why should you sit there and suck it up and go, well, actually, if it was 2 years ago, I'd have a problem, but because it's 2.5 years ago, 10 years, 5 years, I will just get over it. I don't really wash that one. But there has been quite a taboo, hasn't there, in terms of historically as well, in terms of senior royals, David, being in courtrooms, giving evidence in this way. It hasn't happened, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but what, for about a century or so?
Yes, and clearly in completely different circumstances where they were treated totally differently with formal deference and, to be blunt, largely got away with lying. And, but I think the Harry thing is a phenomenon which is totally of our time. And the way I think we've got to understand it, it's a conflict between two completely different views of what is truth. There's a wonderful cartoon, and the idea has been used, like all the best ideas, it's been stolen, which is, you know, that the standard, I will tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I will tell my truth, nothing but my truth, and the whole of my truth, so help you God. Now, this is Harry, as it were, because he... Exactly what Joe's saying, because he feels that this has happened, because he feels inside him, he knows inside him this has happened. But unfortunately, he's confronted with another version of the truth, which is the brutal version of the truth, which is established by cross-examination and evidence. And he's got facing him one of our greatest QCs, Andrew Green, and Green simply at each stage said, "Sir, Prince Harry," and by the way, Prince Harry got terribly confused. He thought the instruction was to address counsel as my lord rather than the judge. So Mr. Green suddenly finds himself promoted to my lord. At each point, Green does one very simple thing. He says, let's look at where this statement might have come from. Harry is convinced it was by phone hacking. He will then show, and he shows in the minutest detail, that it came from a palace statement. It came from putting two stories together. It came from, dare one say it, the restaurateur with whom he dined. You know, this sort. In other words, what you're doing is you are reflecting this cult of feeling. This will not stand in an English court of law, and it shouldn't. You should only be condemned when there is evidence. And Harry, I'm afraid, is hopeless.
Yeah, but this is about what all this judge has got to conclude is when it comes to the balance of probabilities, is it more probable that, I don't know, whatever story it is, came from legitimate means, or is it more probable that actually some underhand business was occurring?
And I think that is a very important point, Michelle, because it's a civil court, so nobody's going to go to prison. I think the other interesting thing in today's hearing was Jane Kerr, who is the Mirror's, or was the Mirror's royal editor. And I just think that she was given quite a lot of pressure. Like, where did you get the stories from? Did you know where the stories come? Well, you know, we could talk to any of our colleagues out there in the newsroom. You have to be able to say, you're not necessarily to reveal your sources, but yes, it came from someone that I trust. Did she know it was illegal? We don't know. I think, you know, there's
there's a really there's a very important distinction. You're saying that underhand equals illegal. It doesn't. Backstairs gossip is not illegal. Somebody talking out of turn is not illegal. The only thing that was any of these people were actually accused of that was illegal was phone tapping.
Which they've said they've not done in this case, haven't they?
And unfortunately, there is astonishingly little evidence. But then when you think about it, how would there be evidence? Do you see what?
Yeah, but this is
in other words, again, Michelle, think about it. The evidence has got to be, in a sense, negative. What Andrew Green was able to show was that there were alternative sources for all of these stories. In other words, the argument that I think Joe, to an extent, that you and that the Prince are all putting forward, that these had to come from the illegal means of phone tapping, is not sustained by the evidence.
But all you've got to prove is that on the balance of probability, it did. So yes, the law. And this is
no. You're misunderstanding. The balance of probability is overwhelmingly against the Prince's position.
Well, we shall see when the conclude. But I had the exact same barrister, David Sherborne, who's Prince Harry's guy. He was my guy. I've been through this exact same process with the newspaper group. We settled our case outside of court. I had an apology in an open court where they accepted that.
Can I ask, what is the parallel? What was the issue?
Pretty much the exact same thing, mine on a much lesser scale, to what Prince Harry's had. So I had very personal information printed about me, about my private life, about my relationships at the time, about a pregnancy as well at the time, that I firmly believed they couldn't. How would you have got that information? How? I didn't tell you. The person involved didn't tell you. Pretty much no one knew about this, and I went through years of what Harry went through, which is paranoia.
But again, then let's look at what your barrister did. What your barrister
My barrister was Prince Harry's barrister.
Exactly.
Exactly the same guy, David Sherborne.
No, so you're very much on side with him. But let's just look at what he did. He showed that, presumably, that there was, on balance of probability, no other way that information could have been found. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, unfortunately, you're not listening to what's been going on, because what I'm afraid the other barrister, what Andrew Green is showing repeatedly, is that for every one of these stories, there were multiple alternative sources.
But what the pushback to that is,
there is no pushback.
If it was as simple as that, because
there is no pushback.
I'm sure that there was an offer to settle outside of court, and it was Harry that was saying,
I don't think there was. I don't think there was.
I think that would be very interesting, because there is a part that we perhaps don't know about that was there, because there was some report a few months ago about a settlement out of court between Harry and William for an invasion of privacy, maybe not related to this exact case, but that was done and dusted. Now, Harry has chosen to pursue this, and presumably at the same time, his brother and other members of the family were also subject to the same sort of intrusion. If he was standing up there as a spokesperson or as holding a beacon for people like you and all the other people who are not so famous as him, I think he'd have more credibility.
Do you? Is he credible to you at home? Do you sit there and feel any sympathy? Because I went through all this last night. I do sit and look at this court case, and when I hear some of the things that he's saying, I do feel sympathy when he sits there and says...
But sympathy isn't enough to convict.
Yeah, but have you ever lived your life where something deeply personal about you, deeply personal, that has real consequences to your life, has been made front-page news, and you sit there...
I mean, of course I have.
But you don't know who's done it to you.
No. But
this is my question. You've answered my question before I've even finished giving me my question. My question is, have you ever been
going
in that
on a long time?
Yes. Well, I'll go on as long as I want. It's my show. That your private information is out on their front pages, and you sit there. You do not know who has done it to you until you have experienced that level of paranoia about the people that you love and trust and respect them. Until you've experienced that, you isolate yourself from them. You are distant from them. It affects everything in your life, and unless you've been there, it's really hard.
You're doing my truth. You're doing the triumph of feeling. Now, what this case is demonstrating conclusively is that the triumph of feeling is not enough.
Well,
the triumph of feeling without evidence.
I'll tell you whose feelings have triumphed in this particular segment. That is my director, because he told me about 4 times that I've got to go to a break. So I will. He can triumph. He got his way. We shall go to a break, and I'll throw it open to you during that time. What do you make to it? Am I just a little bit deluded, basking in the feeling, my truth? He's nodding away, you can't see him. You tell me at home. When I come back, lots to get into with you. I want to talk about pride. Should kids at school be getting involved in it? Speaking of kids, if they're involved in things like knife crime, they don't grass up their mates, should you, as a parent, have to lose your social housing? Of course, migrant boats as well. Don't go anywhere. See you in 2.
Coming up, brace yourself for day 2 of Harry's High Court testimony as we continue our exclusive coverage of his assault on the British Free Press. Expect more bombshells like this using our Harry.
The phrase two-faced may have come from a voicemail. That's how I've always seen him. I've never smoked a joint in that pub or in my father's house.
So join me, Samantha Markle, Lady Colin Campbell and Jim Davidson for Harry's Evidence, The Verdict, Day 2, coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m, only on GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry. I was with you until 7 o'clock, but quite frankly, I think I might head off early. Mike says, Michelle, give it up. You've lost this one. The problem is this new phenomenon in our nation. Everyone is concerned about feelings over facts. David is spot on. Noel says, you are unrealistic, Michelle. Facts don't care about your feelings. They don't care about Harry's either. Hamble says, Michelle, you're wrong. David is absolutely spot on. Quite frankly...
Rah, rah, rah.
Yeah, none of you. I could go on, but you get the gist. You all have precisely zero sympathy for Harry. I've tried. I tried last night. I tried again tonight to try and convert you to my way of thinking. You're all having absolutely none of it.
But if it wasn't Harry, what about Millie Dowler's parents?
Well, but I have sympathy for Harry in this situation anyway.
I know, but I mean, I'm just asking the audience.
And anyway, I don't think it is. I'm not going to get back into this because I've got really important matters that I want to move on to. But for me personally, it's not about facts over feelings. It's about if you know in your heart of hearts, the people involved, you know that didn't come from anywhere. You know it. Yes, you might not be able to cast iron, rock solid prove it, but can you prove it enough to say that actually, balance of probability, it didn't come from anywhere else anyway? You know what, I could go on all day long, but you're all in disagreement with me. You guys, what do I do with you here? I'll move on. That's what I'll do. A school in Derbyshire. Have you seen this? Honestly, I say it often, Wales gone mad. Anyway, kids as young as 11 were told that they could come into school in full-blown drag if they wanted to, rainbows and all the rest of it, to express themselves for a pride event. I've got to say, there has been a bit of a backlash against this. I'll start with you on this. The school itself has essentially rode back from this now. They're not going to do it. They say, basically, oh, yeah, we don't want to distract the kids that are doing GCSEs. Anyway, your thoughts on it? Do you think they should have even suggested this, done this in the first place?
Nobody's forcing them to do it. I think pride is a wonderful thing, and I think...
Why?
Because it allows people to be open and out about their sexuality instead of having to worry and hide and fear criminal prosecution.
But this is a criminal prosecution. You don't get criminally prosecuted in this country.
Not now, you don't, but you did.
Well, what's that got to do with now?
But because we've moved on.
Exactly.
So
why
pride is good.
Then?
Well, I think pride is a good thing, and I think. Well, I've just said why.
No, but the reason you've just told me why. You've said so that people can come out without fear of prosecution, but you're not going to be prosecuted. Life's moved on, as you've just also concluded. So why do I need to, when I go get a tin of baked beans, be bombarded with rainbows? Why?
Because it's celebrating everybody. It's about, I mean...
It's not. It's celebrating a tiny fraction of the population which I belong to. And I am fed up of what were alternative causes, like gay rights, black rights, whatever, being turned into a new compulsory mainstream. I mean, you've talked about a school in Derbyshire. I happen to bank with Coots. I want to vomit when I see the Queen's banker plastering itself in rain.
He's rich, dear listeners, he's rich. If you don't know that reference, basically he's telling us on the sly he's minted. Anyway, carry on.
But it just seems to me that this is the bizarre thing. We've decided that what was essentially 60s counterculture is now mainstream and is compulsory. We have this series of history months, of pride days, of whatever, and it seems to me simply to be wrong. It's as tiresome as, you know, having to stand up and salute flags, and it's actually much more damaging.
But this is not compulsory at this school. We're talking about a school in Derbyshire. If you unpick
But sorry, if a school, forgive me, if a school says we're going to have a Pride Day, for children, effectively it is. Can you imagine if it had gone ahead, the one child who doesn't turn up with painted toenails or whatever it is? Now, also it seems to me, parents should have
what about if you're religious anyway?
I was going to say parents should have a moral choice on this.
Nobody is saying it is compulsory.
I mean, why is it there in the fact? Why do children who go to school to be educated on, I don't know, mastery, why do those children need to be involved in celebrating the sexuality of adults?
In fact, I'm sorry, isn't it actually, forgive me, isn't it actually, if you look at the curriculum, a version of this is compulsory. I don't have at my fingertips what is, there's a special term now for, you know, social, sexual or whatever it is, education. But being told about these things is at a surprisingly young age. And many parents, and particularly of our ethnic minorities, find this profoundly troubling, and in my view, rightly so.
Right, so let's come back in.
Yeah, but sorry, why should institute? Right, why? My question to you is, why should institutions be interfering in any way in what is an intensely personal matter?
Okay, there are several points to unpick here. Let's start with the corporates, and I completely agree with you that it is just like any sort of, oh, let's jump on that bandwagon, whether it's greenwashing, whether it's social mobility, whether it's whatever it is. And I completely agree with you that a lot of it is just stick up a banner, but does it actually work in practice? But I think in order to be less prejudiced, it's quite good that these things are out there, and it's fun. You don't have to be gay to go on a Pride March. You don't have to be gay to get involved in the carnival atmospheres that are in Margate or Brighton or wherever. And I think...
Are you comfortable? I mean, I speak as a gay man, and we won't discuss the issue of sexual practices. Are you comfortable with people turning up in leather bondage gear at these things? I mean, do you know what I think?
Hang on, David. That's a good Where are these leather bondage things? Which people turning up where?
I mean, they are regular participants in Pride. And in other words, isn't it? What I'm trying to say is this is a bizarre turning inside out of what should be personal and private experiences. Which, I mean, you were talking about the business of sexual relations, of pregnancy, and whatever. And what we've started to do, and celeb culture is part of the reason for it, the whole business of social media, we started to turn ourselves inside out. I mean, once upon a time, you know, there were things that you couldn't possibly say, everything to do with sex. Now it's virtually compulsory. People are expected to talk about it openly, and in a fashion.
I've forgotten what the question was.
I remember what it was. He's asking you, are you comfortable then seeing? You're talking about Pride marches when you see men dressed in
indeed women
gear, women fetish gear, leather get-up, all the rest of it, with children wandering around.
Yes.
With large penises.
Let me answer the question. I've never seen anybody at a Pride march or a Pride event wearing large penises. They may have large penises, but I have never seen them on display. Just this thing about drag, I think this is a whole nonsense that's being whipped up. We have pantomime dames. We have, you know, a history where men dressed as women because women weren't allowed to be actors in order to perform in Shakespeare's plays and many other plays. Dressing up for World Book Day.
Right, you have Mrs. Doubtfire as well, right?
Yeah,
so yes,
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes, hang on, but there is a monumental difference. So the things you're talking about, pantomime dames, Mrs. Doubtfire and all the rest of it, when you look at things like some of these drag queen acts that are going to children parents taking their kids to these drag queen, that's not this. This is men dressed as sexualised women, often doing sexualised activity, gyrating and all the rest of it. It's appalling if you ask me, and I think there's something not quite right upstairs if you take your kid to those events.
Well, but it's people's choice, and it's on television. You know, people watch drag race, drag programmes. Blimey, we were watching Danny LaRue when David and I were young.
Indeed. But that was, again, Danny LaRue was in many ways desexualised. I mean, the extraordinary thing that, of course, did become very popular was Lily Savage. I don't know whether you ever went to the Black Cap. I did. You've never heard such a stream. Very funny if you're a gay man and pissed. Very unfunny.
Drunk is the word, David.
Very unfunny if it's put into a different context of a school.
Well,
and I mean, I must let me make a confession. I'm astonished.
Is this going to be a very quick confession?
Yeah, I'm astonished at listening to myself sounding like an old prude. But it does seem to me that this aggressive and deliberate sexualisation of children is profoundly dangerous, profoundly damaging, and we are reaping terrible consequences.
I have to say, I agree with you on that one. I want to throw that open to you at home as well. I think it's almost a little bit embarrassing, actually. The second the clock strikes the start of Pride, organisations can't get there quick enough, change their logos, get out their statements, put up their flags. It's almost like ready, set, go. Oh, you're not quick enough. And Joe mentions, by the way, people coming out and having no fear of being criminally prosecuted. It makes me laugh. So many organisations celebrating Pride in this country where you can be gay, but remaining absolutely stum in countries where it would make a difference, where they do peddle their wares. But guess what? They don't put the Pride flags up there. Why not? I wonder if they really do care about gay rights, you tell me. Anyway, look, if you live in a social housing apartment, flat, whatever, should you be at risk of getting turfed out if your kid is involved with knives and knife crime but doesn't grass up perpetrators of crime? Your thoughts? See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel, sort of find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, historian and GB News contributor David Starkey and political commentator Joe Phillips. Albert says, I am gay and I'm fed up with pride. It's become more and more political. Most companies having their badges with the pride colours, basically to just feel fashionable. It's hypocrisy, he says, and he stopped going to pride events many, many years ago. Your thoughts on that? Anyone? Hello? Are you out there? Do you exist? Do you think actually what we're talking about is a good thing? Joe doesn't actually see the problem with a lot of it. Do you agree with that? Get in touch. If you do, Kathy says, gosh, please, can we just let kids be kids? Hear, hear to that. Now, get this, a Labour councillor speaking sense. He caught my eye, so he did. He's saying, actually, that families should be evicted if their kids don't grass on people in their circle who've committed knife crimes. This is Darren Rodwell. He basically says we have to look at tenancy agreements if these kids, the families, refuse to speak out. I find this quite interesting, and I get it. I think of Olivia Platt-Corbell. We covered that story a long time, desperate, trying to appeal to communities to grass up what they knew. They knew, people knew who was involved in crimes like this, and they didn't tell. Not just that crime, loads of different crimes like it. So if you live in social housing, you're one of them, you're sheltering these people, you're not grassing on them, you're halting proceedings going in the direction that they should you be able to keep your council house?
Well, I was brought up, I don't know, how were you brought up on a council estate? I was, and this is obviously a very long time ago, I'm very ancient, but there was a profound level of social discipline. It was maintained essentially by the women. The women were, including my mother, they were like figures out of Coronation Street. Do you remember Ina Sharples?
I do.
They like this.
Oh, he's doing it.
They were like that. Sorry, I'm doing drag. I'm doing drag, Joe. I'm doing drag. I've actually done drag on TV once for a Channel 4 ident. But
Anyway,
that's an entire. But the important thing is there was a high level of social discipline maintained by the families there. To have a garden that was unkempt, your neighbours. It wasn't a question of, as it were, the police being involved. We had a single criminal family on the estate. I remember their name. They were called Capstick, and they were socially shunned. Now, what's happened is, since this is 1940s, 50s, early 60s, since then we've decided stigma is a bad thing. We don't believe in it. We don't believe in social rules anymore. We believe that people have got rights and they have no duties. And I'm afraid we're reaping the consequences. And we're also reaping the consequences of something else, because we were told to be quiet. I will shut up after saying this, of the deliberate importation of a quasi-gangster culture. You were talking about the business of grassing up. We know elements of it. I mean, there were native gangster cultures in Britain, in major cities, but there's been a general spread of a kind of Jafaican all this business of look at virtually every pair of young men appearing on social media, you will see it.
Oh, well, I look at some of these kids appearing on social media who think the gangsters. I just want to tell them to pull their trousers up. I look at them and I just think, you're supposed to be frightened.
It's part of the same phenomenon.
I don't even know how you walk along with your trousers down there. Anyway, I remember the saying, snitches get stitches. And I think there is a fear culture, perhaps.
Yes, completely. And, I can understand what this Darren Rodwell is trying to say, but it's not the way to go about it. And I think, the point you made about Olivia Pratt-Corbell, the woman who eventually brought that killer to justice will have to live a completely different life
and witness protection
for all of her life. That was incredibly brave to do. She's a grown woman. She may be a mother. I don't know the details, but she did it, and very huge credit to her. But her life is changed irrevocably. To ask children who are perhaps frightened because there are gangs hanging around, threatening them on the way to school, is a completely different thing. To then threaten families with basically eviction because perhaps one 13-year-old, 14-year-old won't snitch is utterly ludicrous. David is right when he talks about that sense of community, and that sense of community within estates. But of course we don't have council estates like we used to have, because all the council houses got sold off. Where you do have estates, they are run in a completely different way. They might be housing associations, they might be other ways of being organised. And those sort of community things like park keepers, the local bobby, the people who kept a general eye on stuff aren't there anymore. And you've got children, young children, carrying knives because they are frightened that they are going to need to use
because they enjoy doing it.
No, David.
No.
David, I'm sorry.
There are
that
people.
Is absolute
it
nonsense.
is not.
A 12-year-old or 13-year-old.
You've talked a lot. There are a lot of people who love the gangster culture. It gives them power. It gives them a sense of authority, and we've got to find a way of breaking it.
Do you disagree with what he's saying?
I think it's absolute nonsense to say that a 12-year-old who is frightened and thinks that they've got to carry a knife is enjoying.
But do you think that there are perhaps a different collection of... yes, because I'm sure that there'll be some 12-year-olds that are being hoodwinked.
Yeah, there'll be the power. There'll be those.
I'm sure there are people, as there have always been, people who like the idea of being in a gang, and we know very well whether that's Teddy Boys and Beatniks, or whether it's Mods and Rockers, or whether it's, whatever gang it is, it has an appeal and an attraction, particularly in areas when there's not much else going on.
Joe, you're being naive. This has become utterly pervasive and utterly destructive, and we've got to find a way of breaking it. And I'm deeply impressed by this man daring to say this. It's very striking if you actually look at what the typical response from people like you has been. It has been, oh, this is due to the cutbacks on youth clubs. Or again, the usual line is, this is because of inequality. There is a refusal to admit that the problem is a cultural one, and it's got to be tackled culturally. And surely, don't you accept there've got to be social sanctions? Now,
Let her answer that question then. Do you accept there's got to be social sanctions?
There have to be.
There are social sanctions with somebody who is renting any tenant against, antisocial behaviour. There'll be rules and laws and bylaws and what have you about when you put the rubbish out, whether you can have pets,
Yeah, but
etc.,
this is a different thing, though, isn't it?
But to say you might lose your home, an entire family, because one person isn't going to grasp... I mean, where are you going to put these people?
I often find it quite surprising when you see these kids and they're going out and about knifing each other, and then the mum comes out and she goes, but my boy was like the nicest boy, and I
He was an angel. He's usually an angel.
Yeah,
He's usually an
I
angel.
look at the kids' social media and I'm like, really? Really? And then I have to ask myself, as parents, don't you even look what your kids are doing? How come apparently all these nice angelic kids do run around with machetes hanging out of their backsides in their trousers? You tell me your thoughts. Do you deserve to lose your home, though, just because of it? I don't know. I'm sure you will, though. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, cruise ships. Have you been on one? Is chance going to be a fine thing? Well, apparently, the people crossing the channel, that is where they may well be calling home very soon. Don't go anywhere, we'll be looking at that.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7, alongside me historian, GB News contributor David Starkey and political commentator Joe Phillips. Dave says, when I was younger, tenants were inspected in council houses, basically to make sure that they were maintaining the properties to the level expected of them. It's dividing you, though, whether or not parents should lose their properties because of the actions of their kids. F-Man, I suspect that's not your real name, he or she, has tweeted me, said, this is the first time I've ever tuned into your show because I've got a busy life life, but I'm sitting here with a glass of wine and I'm enjoying every minute. Well, hello and cheers to you. Now, have you ever been on a cruise ship? If you have, you might have risen a glass or two. Nice entertainment, nice, well, you name it, everything, quite frankly. Cinemas, bars, restaurants, they're lovely, aren't they? Well, if you did, indeed, cross the channel in a dinghy, you might have looked up at those cruise ships and thought, wow, how the other half live. Well, it's not going to be the other half anymore because there's proposals that actually some of these people crossing the channel will be put up on cruise ships. I have to say, I do suspect things like the entertainment packages, the drinks packages and all the luxuries involved with cruising will not be part of this. Your thoughts there?
Well, do you know what? Exactly the same thing happened in both world wars. The luxury ships, liners, were turned into troop ships and people were crammed in. And I suspect that's exactly what will happen.
But there's a monumental difference there, though, isn't there? I'm suspecting that the troops are there, you're trying to fight for the greater good of the country, you're contributing to a brighter...
No, but I mean, what I'm saying is...
The point is the same. They're not going to be getting on...
They're not going to be getting a luxury experience. These boats will be transformed. I mean, it'll be exactly the same thing as happened with the hotel. The bunk beds will be put in, they'll be in crowded circumstances,
so do you think it's a good
ballrooms...
policy,
Well, all the important thing about a ship, why are ships traditionally used in this kind of way? Because it's quite difficult to get off them. In other words, you can't run away very easily, and one of the things that's been happening, of course, is precisely there's been an enormous seepage from so-called secure centres.
So you think it's about containing people?
It's about containing.
Right, thoughts, Jo?
Well, I completely agree with David. They're not going to be, you know, walking up the gangplank, having their photograph taken and sitting down.
Being handed evening dress, you know, for the captain's table.
Whipped up by the, you know, although I have to tell you, I went on a cruise ship once and never again. It was the worst holiday I've ever had in my life. But I did learn to do ballroom dancing.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
When I was on The Apprentice, one of my tasks was on a cruise ship, actually, and I had to do an entertainments package.
Did you?
Yeah, we did. And I think we did ballroom dancing. My overwhelming memory of that is going around to the other cabins of the competing teams, taking down their posters so that they didn't promote their activity, so no one knew to go to them rather than us. I think you might call that cheating.
No, I think that's just...
I think Prince Harry will be very interested in this. It seems to me to be deeply underhand.
So look, no major objections to that policy from the panel on the basis that it's about containment, on the basis that they're not cruise ships as you might expect them to be. It's all stripped out, back to basics. Many people are coming back.
Deal with the backlog of asylum seekers.
Well, yeah, I know, obviously. Many people are coming back to that situation about pride. What you two have just been discussing. Is Jo Phillips lesbian or bisexual? If she's neither, why does she think she can dictate to gay people what they should and shouldn't do or accept? He says that's what homophobia is. Heterosexuals telling us what we can and can't do and should and shouldn't accept.
Nobody's dictating. You don't have to go.
Yeah, but why should it be
you don't have to take part?
A month-long thing? That's one of the feedback that's coming through from you guys at home as well. What you're asking is, why does it need to be a month? But, I mean, why?
Because again, it goes back, to the point that I tried to make, that we've instituted a new kind of religious calendar. We've replaced the old calendar of Lent, Whitsuntide, All Saints' Day and whatever, with these new fashionable alternative causes of the 60s, which have in practice become compulsory. And they're being forced on us by capitalist washing businesses.
And I have to say, in case anyone's not aware, you're saying this as a gay man.
As a very gay man.
Oh,
indeed, a very gay man. a very, very gay man.
Right,
Somebody who came out in 1972 when there was a risk. Admittedly, where I did it, there wasn't much of one because it was LSE. And as one of my heterosexual grudging colleagues said, in your department, it's practically compulsory. But still, in the world outside, it wasn't. I know what I'm talking about. I once, Jo, you will love this, I once went on a march.
Oh?
Do you know what I found difficult?
What?
Keeping a straight face.
Well, there you are. Have you ever been on a gay pride march?
No, but I've seen them. I haven't been on a march, but I have been in places where it's been taking place.
Well, you know my views. If you watch this show often, I just think it's just become just about hypocrisy, just about corporates trying to show, look at me, look at how cool I am.
It's gay washing. It's gay washing. It's gay washing.
Get your rainbow badge on, get your pronoun badge on.
No, I completely agree with that. The corporate exploitation.
Well, do you know what I'd say to those corporates? Pack it in with your rainbows, pack it in with your pronouns, actually get back to basics and deliver the services that you're supposed to, which half of you, by the way, you can't even pick up your own phones and give customer services in this day and age. So how about you focus on that instead? Maybe I'm just old-fashioned. That's all I've got time for. Joe and David, thank you. Have yourselves a fantastic evening. Owen has been in touch on Twitter as well, saying that he has very much enjoyed the show tonight and very much enjoyed the panel combination. What a compliment. You two can come back again. For now, have a fantastic evening. Do not go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next. Either we'll see you tomorrow. Night-night.
Good evening. Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Changes are on the way, but tomorrow is going to be more of the same. It starts a bit dull and eventually it turns sunny for most, with the eastern side again likely to keep a lot of cloud. Down to the southwest, low pressure is brewing. That will create a bit of a change in the outlook. But for, as I say, tonight and tomorrow, it's more of the same. So the cloud that's been lurking in the east just drifts back further inland as we go through the night. So a fine warm evening for many, but the cloudy and cooler conditions in the east spread back to most areas through the night. Temperatures holding up at 8 to 10 Celsius. A bit warmer than that in the southwest, where it's going to get quite windy, actually. A blustery night across the far southwest of England and parts of the south coast of Wales as well. It will be windy here too during Thursday. For most, it's a grey start tomorrow, but the clouds should break up in most locations from mid-morning onwards. Again, parts of the east coast looking fairly glum, much of northern Scotland as well. Perhaps a sunnier day across parts of East Anglia. Maybe a touch warmer, although there will still be that cold wind coming in from the North Sea. Highest temperatures down to the southwest could get up to 25 degrees come Thursday afternoon. But down to the southwest, as well as the winds picking up, the cloud increasing. And look at this. Haven't seen much of this recently. Rain in the form of showers, which are more likely during Friday in the southwest. Hit and miss, not everywhere seeing them, but there will be some around. Elsewhere on Friday, it's a similar story. Starts a bit drab. East coast stays cool and quite murky, but for many, it will be another sunny day on Friday. And again, west will be best for those temperatures, getting into the low, maybe mid-20s, but the humidity will start to rise in the southwest with the threat of those showers coming along. An increasing risk of seeing those